Hi and welcome to this video. Welcome to the world I live in, the Susan K world, where it's all about personal growth and development. If it's your first time here, we would like to welcome you and we thank you. We request that you like, share, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. In today's video, I will be sharing about my personal salvation journey. I thank you all who have been supporting us. You've been sharing our content. And I received a message from one of you. It was very touching, very personal. And your request was that I share my personal salvation journey with you. And that is exactly what I'm going to do in this video. Well, I'll take you way back before I met the Lord, before I chose to walk with the Lord. This was about 20 years. Oh yeah, it has been a 20-year journey. It has been a journey of bumps, humps, of level ground, and so much more. So it's so amazing how we all tend to come into spaces that most probably we were not thinking about at a particular time. But back to my journey, I remember it was 2000, there was 2000, and it was in the month of November. It was 2001, in the month of November. And I remember I was going through a lot of stuff during that time in my life. And of course, I was looking for answers. But it seemed like no one could give me those answers. I had just graduated from the university. I was in a relationship. And I was living a life that somebody could have thought was a very good life. I lived in a very good neighborhood. I had a car to myself. I had a personal car. But life had a void. And this void, the money I had could not fill it. The relationship that I was in could not satisfy it. I just felt I needed something more. And I started looking in different places for that which I thought was more. So on this one day, again, that reminds me, on this day, I remember I was just driving around the city. It was around lunchtime. I'll never forget, it was around lunchtime. And I met someone. Who just changed my life. It's like she flipped my life to the other side. I was moving towards darkness, but she flipped my life into the light. And that is my lovely Auntie Betty. Now, I would like to tell you the story of Auntie Betty. Auntie Betty was a wife to one of my relatives, whom I would call an uncle. But that uncle was living out of the country. By the time I got to know her, she was sick. She had HIV and AIDS, together with her young child, who was around 6 years. And I remember during the time when she was sick, at a certain point, she came to live with us. And as a young girl, I remember around that time, I was, I think, in my HSC. I was in HSC. And she had blisters all over her body. She was always in pain. She was mourning throughout the night. She had a child who was full of wounds from head to toe. And it was literally difficult to take care of these two people. And when you are at that age, there is a way you view life. And I remember I left Auntie Betty. By the time I met her again on my drive in the city, it was a period of about 3 years. So when I saw her, given the picture that I had of her 3 years ago, I believed she should have died by then. So I am driving down this hospital road and I see her. Of course, my first instinct was like, this looks like Auntie Betty. I lowered my head into the side mirror and I was like, this is so much like Auntie Betty.
So I stop and I reverse to where she was. I roll down my mirror and I actually ask, "Are you Auntie Betty?" And indeed she was. In that moment, what I was carrying, the thoughts that I had, just vanished. I sat her in my car. We parked in an open space. It was at a petrol station. We spoke for 3 hours. It was just amazing. And she was introducing me to her Jesus. You know, when people are speaking to us about Jesus, when they are introducing to us Jesus, the best way to testify about Jesus is about what he has done for you. Now, I am talking about somebody whom I know for sure what she was suffering from, whom I believed could have died by then. But here she was, sitting next to me. There was no black mark on her body. She's a very light-skinned lady. And one of these days, I will bring her and I will show her to you if she allows. Because she's an evangelist right now. She goes to different countries preaching the gospel. She's a pastor in the church here in Kampala. She's a very amazing person, and she loves to share about the Lord. So after sharing with her, she told me a story of how she was dumped in hospital, nobody to take care of her, until these good Samaritans came. There were people who used to come from different churches to preach and pray for the people who were sick. And these people had pity on her. They carried her and took her to their church. And she said her healing process took more than a year. But she was in hospital. She was in church, just like somebody who is in hospital, because she was given a bed, literally a bed in church. So as the ministration would be going on, she was lying on a mattress, on a mat, in the church. So she was always in God's presence. Was she listening? Was she hearing? Was she doing what she was being told? I believe that her faith grew during that season. So I see her, and she is super good. All she can talk about is the God that had healed her, the Jesus that she had met, the different experiences that she had had with the Lord. And I remember when, towards the end of our conversation, I told her, I want your God. To the extent that after meeting her, when she did take me, of course, to her church where she used to pray from, I also, naturally, after hearing all that, I gave my life to Christ, accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And it has been a 20-year journey, walking with the Lord, listening to him, and following him. Has it been a perfect journey? No, it hasn't. It's full of bumps, it's full of stretches, it's full of hills, of rocks, but it's the best life that somebody can ever have. So when she introduces me to Christ, she introduces me to church. I remember the place that I was taken where she was, with the fellowship where she was. The head of the fellowship telling us that, this is a fellowship. I don't do church. I don't do Sunday church. So you will have to go to churches where you will be ministered to, where you will get spiritual fathers and all that you need for spiritual growth and maturity. And I remember, of course, even that I didn't know so many churches, she recommended that I go with her to the church that she used to pray from. So I follow her to her church. But one thing that is really amazing, of course, looking at myself back then, I had, as a young girl, I had graduated. I was driving the car. And on the outward, I looked like I was living a very good life. But as I said, my inside was tearing to pieces. So I reached this church, and it's not the kind of church I imagined myself in. It was a papyrus church, and here was a pastor who did speak English literally. So I knew that this was a man who had never gone to school, or if he he didn't really attain much in regard to school. So of course, my education and my degree kicked in. I started wondering how I could be pastored by somebody who never got to school. But I thank the Lord that God has a way of humbling us. God has a way of working in us and through us. And the beauty of it is that when you have just fallen in love with something, with someone, you will literally do anything, everything that you need to do to hold on to that. What I didn't tell you is that the day I went to their church, to Auntie Betty's church, I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior, and somebody laid their hands on me and prayed for me. I slept like I had never slept before. When I went home, I literally slept. I had spent so many sleepless nights. You know, you sleep and all you can do is look at the ceiling and toss and turn. But that night, I slept. And when I woke up, I was like, I must have hit a jackpot. And I held on to that which I had received. So when I go to this church, as I said, God is so amazing. I get into church. Of course, I had my doubts whenever I looked at the man of God, the environment that I had come into. It wasn't me. I guess so many of us struggle with that. When you start looking at the man of God, that you are seated under, serving under, all that is ministering to you, and you think you're better than them. Maybe through your academics or your achievements, your achievements in so many fields, and you look at this person and you're like, really, Lord, is this the best that you could do? So I was in that kind of situation. But as I said, God has a way of humbling us and teaching us. And there was this man of God didn't tell me to do nothing, but God himself kept on showing me things that I had to do in this ministry, things that I struggled with. And I just told God, I cannot do this. This is not my kind of environment. One of the things the Lord first told me was to become an interpreter in the church. Because when I came to this church, after some time, several people started coming who would only understand English, or who understood English better than the native language of Uganda that was being used by the pastor to minister. So he introduced the aspect of an interpreter. He wanted somebody to interpret him, and of course I wasn't up to it, but somehow I remember one night I was home and the Lord clearly told me what I had to do. So I offer myself to start interpreting. I started interpreting him as he ministers in church, which I did for quite some time. And as I got myself more involved in the things of the ministry, at a certain point, the Lord now shifts me to something that I thought was so outrageous, and that was outreach. This outreach, we had to go and witness to people. First of all, we had to bring people into church, begin with the community, to introduce them to our church, and then we had to go out into different places. I remember there was a team that was doing evangelism, and I joined that team. And what we were doing was going to different marketplaces. But this wasn't my element. This, at least I thought. Eventually, I get into it. Well, looking back, I did study mass comm. I did major in PR and communication. That's my field. But I didn't think that it was this. I thought about it as something out of this world that I had been brought into, the God's world, the Christian world, the church world. I expected to do those things, to implement, to operate my skill outside church. I had to get like a job. That's where I needed to be in order for me to give myself from my academics and my experience in school. So here we were. We started ministering. We would go to markets, literally 2 markets, and witness to people about Jesus and what he had done, what he's capable of doing. And of course, you have always people chasing you, shouting at you, they demoralize you. But I just felt this urge to do this. I finally fell in love with what I was doing. I became a street preacher. I really love what I see, the people that I see in the streets, ministering. I have had people say so many things about them, like people who have nothing to do. I was on those streets. I was a graduate. I was living a good life, a life that a life that people actually did admire. I had my own car. I had that degree on my shoulders, on my head. I had it. But here was God giving me an instruction to go and minister. I did minister in those markets. I remember one day I received a phone call from somebody who said, I seemed like I had become so desperate that I was in the street ministering. It's true, I was desperate. But what I was desperate for was the Lord. I wanted to meet Jesus. I wanted to know God. I wanted to walk with Him. I wanted to get to know, who is this Jesus? How can I walk with Him? How can I be a partaker of the things that are talked about in the Bible? And when you read the Bible, it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book, full of conquests, of overcoming. I wanted to see these things in my life. So there I am, and I'm serving in the ministry, but still I reach a point where my life stagnates. And I was like, no, there must be something more to life than this. I remember at a certain point, one, I did not have a job, so I spent a lot of time in church. And people think that simply because you're spending too much time in church, most probably you have nothing to do. That's right. But two, what I can tell you, that somebody spending time in church, that is if they are doing it for a purpose and they are focused, then I can guarantee you that they are like somebody who goes for conferences, workshops, or reads self-help books. Because in God's presence, whatever you hear, wherever you're hearing it, if you are taking it in, your life is being built. Your skills are being upgraded. There is progress in your life. So here comes a time, and I'm like, Lord, I have been here for quite some time. This was around 2005. And I was like, I needed something more out of life. So I remember I had read the Bible, and I had read where Moses, when Moses went up the mountain, and he told God that he would not come down until the Lord answered him. And I read that scripture. I used to be so militaristic. I said, I am going to do exactly what Moses did. I remember I packed my stuff. I did pack my stuff. And I went to the prayer mountain. It was in the month of March. I remember it was after my birthday in 2005. I went up that mountain. And I said, Lord, I am not coming down. I stayed there for some time. Then I did go back in 2006. From 2005, I was there for about 8 months. And I remember telling the Lord, I will not go down this mountain until I hear from you. I was at that mountain for 8 good months. But what was so amazing is that I heard from the Lord like never before. I received instructions like never before. I had God for myself. Now, during that time, I remember telling the Lord that I wanted a job. By the time I went to the prayer mountain, I said I wanted a job. I wanted to get a job. So when I go to the prayer mountain, one night I pray and I fall asleep. I had this amazing dream. Here I was, and then the president
comes. I was at the prayer mountain, and there seemed to be like a stage for taxis. And the president comes. I still remember how he looked like. He came in the image of when he had taken over the leadership of this country. And he comes to me and he says to me that my boys have disappeared from me. Can you give me a lift? When I looked around, all the other drivers for the other taxis were not there. I was the only one there. And here was the president asking me for a lift. So I say yes. I sit him in my car and we start driving. So as we are driving, I am so excited that the president is seated next to me and I'm giving him a ride. So it's a very exciting thing. So I ask him for two things. I say to him that, one, I want you to give me a job. And I say, two, I want to meet you in State House. So when I told him that, I remember him looking at me. I couldn't read anything from his face. Then the next statement that came from his mouth was that my boys are there, because then in the dream, I see a lot of dust and I see a lot of dust and I hear sirens. I hear sirens and vehicles coming, and there's too much dust. And he's like, those are my boys. They are looking for me. So we stop and he gets out. When he gets out, he goes. Why I said the story is so amazing is that during that time, they were preparing for the elections of 2006, our presidential elections. As the norm is that the president normally meets people on his campaign trail. So my mom is somebody, during that time, she was very active in politics. So of course, as people meet the president, they ask for so many things. And one thing that my mom asked for, I remember when she later told me, was that she told the president that I have educated my children, but they don't have jobs. What amazes me is that I have this dream. Then during the same time, within the same week, is when my mom meets with the president. So I remember receiving a phone call, not even from my mom, but it's after I had received the phone call and asked my mom that she tells me what had transpired. So I am called from where I was at the prayer mountain, and I am asked to deliver my papers to a certain office. I remember calling one of my siblings. I wasn't the only one. All my siblings, my other siblings as well, who had qualified by then, were requested to take their academic papers. But out of us who took, this is why it's so amazing. It was my miracle. It was my time. That's the beauty about salvation. Out of those who took their papers, I was the only one who got a job. And what's amazing is that before even that happened, I had had an experience in a lunch hour fellowship where a woman of God said to me, she pointed me out, she called me out of thousands. And she just pointed and said, you. Of course, normally when somebody says you look outside to see whether it's you or somebody else. She kept on saying you. People thought it was. Then she said, you come. And I went. So she said so many things about me which were true. Then she talked about me wanting to get a job. And she said that your position is just going to be created. I was like, okay, so there is no job in the world for me right now. My actual job is just going to be created. This was months before I even I got this encounter. So when I get this encounter, this is 205 when I get this encounter. I take my papers, I get the job. Now back to what the lady had told me. Actually, 205 is when the Access to Information Act was passed. And that is the time when government started recruiting professional communications officers. And I went and did interviews. I did get the job, and I was the first officially, through public service, the first public relations officer. I was recruited at the level of a senior public relations officer. I served in that position for quite some time. But those are the things that God can do. I've seen God do tremendous, tremendous, tremendous things. But that is one of the things that I can tell you about salvation. I started ministering. And you know, when I started working, of course, now I had to balance my salvation life. Remember, before I didn't have a job, so I spent a lot of time in church, doing church stuff. When the job comes in, I have to divide my time between church and work, which I did struggle with a bit. Of course, I had my free time before, but now here I was having a job 8 to 5, and I had to balance. Before, church was throughout the day. After breakfast, go to church. And so it seemed to be much easier. I struggled with it for some time. But when eventually I settled into it, life started balancing out by itself. You do not have to leave your job to serve God. You can serve God as you work. You can do different things as you work. Salvation is very important. It's key, and it's a journey. There will be so many humps, so many bumps, so many rocks, so many hills to climb. But the beauty of it is that at the end of the day, it is a worthwhile journey. Well, don't forget to comment, to share, to like, and hit the notification button so that you'll be the first person to know when our next video goes up. See you in my next video.